world of sports, it is very rare that anyone can end their career with nearly as much success as they did during their prime. But on the NASCAR Modified Tour, one of the greatest examples of a driver having success in the twilight of their career is Tony Hirschman. Before 2004, Hirschman had 3 NASCAR Modified Championships, 2 from 1995 and 1996 for the Bowler family, and once in 1999 for Gary Creddy. However, after doing some research, Hirschman seemed to be one of the best drivers to always be left on the wavier wire after being on top of the series. Let's rewind. It's the winter of 1998. Hirschman went back-to-back in 95 and 96 by winning the title with 4 wins, 21 top 5s, and 30 top 10s in 41 races. In 97 and 98, he had 13 top 5s with 27 top 10s, finishing 4th and 7th in the standings. A 5th season seemed imminent with those stats. However, Hirschman was dumped for young gun Tommy Crivino, whom only managed to finish 8th in the standings in the 1999 season. This left Hirschman confused and waiting to be claimed for the 1999 season. Gary Creddy swooped in and signed Hirschman, and guess what happened? Hirschman went on to smack the competition that season, easily winning the title with 6 wins, 14 top 5s, and 21 top 10s, with an average finish of 4.48. And what happened in 2000? His season started out with 2 wrecks and an engine failure, forcing him to be cut from the team and basically traded for Ted Christopher. Hirschman went to the Bear Racing 11 car and eventually to the number 48 car for Bob and Tom Kehley. However, from 2000 to 2002, Hirschman finished 12th and 10th in the standings with 3 wins. Then in 2002, while now full-time for the Kehley Team, he was sidelined for most of the season with a wrist injury. It looked like his run was over, until 2003 came and the resurgence and fun resumed. So, it would take some time before Hirschman would start padding the stat sheet in 2003. However, once the Thompson 300 came around, he returned to being a consistent front-runner. He was coming off 2 6th-place finishes before the event, and he would improve on his speed with a pole to start the race weekend out. However, we would have to wait until there were only 28 laps remaining to see him shine. He took the lead from Jerry Markey and never looked back. It was his first win for him and his team as an organization, at one of the biggest events in modified racing history, the Thompson 300. This helped build the foundation for 2004 as they would go on to finish 6th at New Hampshire, 2nd at Stafford, and return to victory lane at the season finale, the World Series at Thompson. The chemistry seemed to be there, and the quiet man that Hirschman is was just lurking in the shadows to seize an opportunity in 2004. During the 2004 season, Tony's son, Matt, whom we all know today as Big Money, would help the team with setups and even take on the role as the crew chief when he wasn't doing his own racing. As for his eye in the sky, Tony had his other son, Tony Hirschman III, spotting for him. Now, if that name rings a bell, it should. He is a Joe Gibbs NASCAR Cup Series champion spotter whom helped Kyle Busch win the title in 2015. With both his sons helping guide him around the track while learning his knowledge of the cars in the pits, he set himself up for a strong run at a title where the landscape of NASCAR modified racing was extremely competitive. Now, I was only an 8-year-old, but Tony was my favorite driver at the time, and it felt great to see a driver competing for wins and still fly under the radar, while drivers like Ted Christopher and Eddie Flenke were in the spotlight. At the 2004 season opener at Thompson, Hirschman kicked off the year just like he ended the prior season, by winning the pole. He was able to lead for a while until Todd Zaggady got around him. When the leaders pitted, Hirschman stayed out, trying to use a different tire strategy as he is the most skilled at tire conservation, and inherited the lead. Eventually, Hirschman needed to pit for fresh rubber and did so. He was able to move back up through the field to get a top 5 finish to start the year off as he headed to Stafford for the Spring Sizzler. In what would become my favorite Spring Sizzler to attend, Hirschman would start in the top 5 and remain up front all day. Under the light drizzle that was coming down during the race, leaders Chuck Hausfeld, Ted Christopher, and Eddie Flemke would be the mainstays up front. However, Hausfeld and Christopher pitted late for tires while Flemke took over the lead. Then Flemke would pit later on and allow Jerry Markey, who had to take a provisional to even start the race, inherited the lead and was forced to hold off Tony Hirschman for the final 83 laps. Hirschman made constant moves to the outside lane to pass Markey, but was never able to complete the pass. As we know, Hirschman is one of the cleanest drivers on the circuit, never looks for drama, and tried his best to pass Jerry without contact. This allowed the top 5 to close in on the front 2, but Markey never gave up the bottom lane and held on to win the race. I remember recording this race on VHS after school, and I think it was the best race in 2004 across all races under the NASCAR banner. Nonetheless, Tony would gain points on the leaders and close to within 10 points of the leader, Eddie Flemke and Ted Christopher. As the series headed to the third CT track of the Waterford Speed Bowl, Hirschman was able to continue his run of top 5 finishes. With another top 5 start can a top 5 finish and more points. He finished a solid third at the Speed Bowl. However, point leader Eddie Flemke made a last lap pass on the final restart and won the race. This would extend the points margin to 25 points as the series headed to Tony's home track of Nazareth Speedway. Unfortunately, Hirschman would have his worst race of the year at his home track. He had another great run going after qualifying 5th, but while inside the top 5 with about 20 laps to go, he thought he had a tire going flat and pitted. This resulted in a 25th place finish and a 97-point deficient to the leader at the final race before Nazareth closed its doors. Hirschman needed to get back on top and finish ahead of his main point rival of Flemke in the future. After that rough race, Hirschman was not going to let Nazareth keep him down for long. History will show pretty much only one name in the winner's column at the Stafford Speedway between this race and the end of the 2005 season, and it would be his. He would have a max points day by winning the pole, and after a war between TC Todd Szegedy and himself, he would hold on to win the Haynes 150 and his team's first of what will be 5 victories at the track for his team and first victory of the season. He would cut the point margin nearly in half down to 47 points. The Miller Lite 200 at the Riverhead Raceway was next on the tour schedule. Hirschman was able to keep the 79 of Eddie Flemke and the 13 of Ted Christopher in his crosshairs all night, but was unable to finish ahead of them, costing him about 12 points in the standings. Nobody had anything for Jerry Markey, and this was his final victory, driving for the number 3 Bowler team. At Lake Erie, Hirschman would get back on top and lead the most laps en route to winning the race, while cutting the point standings down to 27 points. The next 2 races were rough for Hirschman. While the fans cheered Reggie Ruggiero's return to victory lane, Hirschman had a 17th place finish at Wall Stadium and an 8th at Beech Ridge. As he headed into the granddaddy of them all of New Hampshire, he was 58 points out of the lead. The Magic Mile had some magic for Hirschman, but the most went to Ted Christopher and his brother Mike as they finished 1 and 2. Hirschman was able to finish 4th while Flemke was 7th, bringing the points down to a 44-point difference at the midway point of the season. The second half of the season saw the tides turn in Hirschman's favor. Seekonk Speedway was next on the schedule, and although he finished in 10th, point leader Flemke finished a rough 26th, surrendering the points lead to Hirschman by 5 points. With a 103-point lead over third-place TC, it looked to be a 2-man race for the title. After a runner-up finish under the lights at Stafford, Hirschman would continue to flex his muscle by holding off Flemke to win the Budweiser 150 at the Thompson Speedway. He started in 10th but was able to communicate the changes he needed to his team to get him to the front. He took the lead on lap 83, as well as surviving the late race green white checkered restart to get his 3rd win of the season and extend his points lead to 65. As the calendar turned into September, the series headed to Waterford for their 2nd and final race at the track for the tour. Hirschman would again grab another pole with his champion rival Flemke starting next to him on the front row. These were the 2 juggernauts throughout the year. However, Todd Szegedy would play the spoiler in this one as he would take lead from leader Flemke with 54 laps to go. This allowed Szegedy to keep the track position and hold on for the win. Again, Hirschman would keep doing what he needed to do to keep the point lead, finishing right with the 79 team, and Hirschman came home 5th to Flemke's 4th. The Thompson Sunoco 300 was next, and it came with a twist. No longer was it just a 300-lap race, but it was separated into three 100-lap segments. It wasn't perceived well, but it would definitely work to Hirschman's advantage in the point standings when it was over. Hirschman had his worst starting position of 36th and would only be able to get up to 17th after segment 1, but the worst was yet to come. Flemke was able to finish second and set himself up for the remainder of the race. When segment 2 started, Hirschman was involved in a wreck on the restart and forcing him to finish 27th in segment 2, while Flemke won the segment. Now when segment 3 started, Hirschman desperately needed to get a good finish because the actual finishing order was by an average finishing position across the three segments. Luckily for the 48th team, Tony pulled through. He took the lead at the beginning of the third segment and held on after multiple restarts to win. When it was over, Flemke would be crowned the winner of the overall race, while Hirschman salvaged an 11th place finish. Somehow the points lead would stay at 60 points between first and second, and this would be the one and only time this format was used. I have a feeling this would have shaken up the points considerably if it was a natural 300 laps with Hirschman having an accident in the second segment. Heading into Stafford for the fall final, Hirschman was riding high as his success at Stafford this year was better than anyone with an average finish of 1.66, while Flemke's average at Stafford this season was 9. However, the top two would find each other up front for the win late in the race. It was only fitting the two best drivers during the 04 campaign would go at it at the end, and Hirschman was able to pass Flemke for the lead with 64 laps to go and take down the victory. This set Hirschman up with an 80-point lead heading into the final race of the season, the World Series at Thompson. So, the sun rose, and the final face-off began for the 2004 NASCAR Modified Tour title between Hirschman and Flemke. Hirschman grabbed his third pole of the year and would show the way for the first 34 laps. He would be challenged by Chuck Hosfeld and eventually Ted Christopher for the lead until finally giving it up on lap 35. Tony would manage a solid top 5 run for the majority of the race, while Flemke was inside the top 10. However, on the lap 57 restart, Hirschman was on the outside lane and made some contact with Todd Szegedy, sending him into the marbles off turn 2 and barely missing the wall. He was fortunate enough to keep it out of the wall, but Eddie Flemke was on his rear bumper and tried to avoid the 48 by passing underneath him, but was unable to do so and made some contact, sending him into the wet infield grass. The steering appeared straight, and he was able to continue but would lose all his track position. Hirschman would cruise to a third-place finish, more than enough to clinch the 2004 championship and the first for the Kehley team. The champagne was sprayed, and Hirschman would add a special fourth ring to his collection. Hirschman's team was based out of New York City. However, the car was prepared by Hirschman's team, including his son Matt, at the family's race shop in Pennsylvania. This showed just how much a devoted family effort can help propel a team back to the top after a few years of struggle. He finished with 4 wins, 12 top 5s, and 16 top 10s, with an average finish of an amazing 6.21 in what I believe is the most competitive time in my life for modern NASCAR Modified Racing Series history. This was only the start to Hirschman's twilight of dominance in his career and was ready to achieve even more in 2005. A new year came, along with a new name for the NASCAR Modified Tour, as Whelen Engineering came on board to be the title sponsor for the series. However, the more things change, the more they stay the same, and the level of competition Tony Hirschman had to face to go back-to-back in 2005 was only going to rise. As the Thompson icebreaker took the green, everyone's eyes were on Ted Christopher and Tony Hirschman. Hirschman would try and short pit and do what he does best and use tire conservation to his advantage for as long as possible. Once he got around TC for the lead, everyone realized it was too early to flex his muscle. The caution would come out at lap 104, and everyone else would take tires. This really hurt Hirschman's strategy and would eventually be passed with 16 laps to go by Zach Sylvester, and from then on, the 48 was just holding on. The last caution set up a green, white checkered finish and really cost Hirschman valuable points. His rival Christopher would make a 3-wide bottom shot move on the restart and hold of Sylvester's last-ditch effort to win the race, but come up a radiator cap length short of the win. Hirschman fell back to 11th. The duel to the finish was amazing, and it was the closest finish in icebreaker history. After a tough end to a good start for the 48th team, they set their eyes on checking off another major race win together. After all of Hirschman's success, he never was able to taste the milk after winning the Stafford Spring Sizzler, and if he was going to get some points back, there was no better opportunity than at the upcoming Sizzler. As the green flag flew over the field at the Sizzler, Hirschman had a great view of the front. He started third and was fast in practice and competing for the lead early. While he was racing for the lead on lap 29, Hirschman would catch the apron on the entrance of turn 3 and the rear bumper of Nevin George and would spin himself out. Hirschman would do what basically nobody does nowadays and get back going without drawing a caution. It would put him behind the 8-ball early, but the veteran knew he had a great car after starting third. As the race went on, TC took over the lead, but Hirschman would patiently work his way to the front, as he is accustomed to doing, and avoid the wrecks in front of him. And with 71 laps remaining, Hirschman would make the pass for the lead. He wouldn't let the early spin force his hand, and his strategy was to take his tires early again. But this time, it would work out. The caution would fly with 2 laps to go, but he would hold off the fresh tires of Todd Szegedy and TC to check off that final box on his resume and the missing major win with the Stafford Spring Sizzler victory. After coming so close a year ago, he would get to wear the wreath around his neck and share the milk with his team in victory lane. It may seem early, but to come back from an early spin and win such a big race was a statement win for the Kehley team, as they wanted to prove to the field that if anyone wanted to take the crown, you'd have to go through the 48 team. He would move up to 4th place in the championship standings, 30 points off the point leader. Unfortunately, Hirschman would face a 3-race setback, even though they qualified and raced really well. He had a poor finish at Riverhead, but Waterford was the heartbreaker. While he won the pole and appeared he was heading for a 3rd-place finish, he spun on the final lap while attempting to make the pass in turn 4, relegating him to a 12th-place finish, crushing all his gains for the points. I remember watching this in the stands, and man did that suck to witness. Then, in the return to Stafford, would be involved in a wreck and would have the rear end break on his car a third of the way through the event, finishing 24th. His team sat in 5th place, 199 points out of the lead. However, you can't keep Hirschman and his team down for long, and at one of his hometown racetracks of Jennerstown, Hirschman got back on track and won the pole in the race. He had his lead out to 4 seconds at one point before having to fight to keep it on another late race restart. At the time of the win, it placed him in a tie with Jeff Fuller for 3rd on the all-time series win list. With the win, he could stop the bleeding and would close to within 113 points of the leader. The New England 100 was next from New Hampshire, and again it was the Christopher and Hirschman show. Hirschman was able to get alongside TC for win on the final lap, but TC was able to hold him off by a couple feet to get the win. I was seated just past the finish line, and when the cars passed me, Hirschman was ahead of the 13th car, so for a second, I actually thought Hirschman won, but he didn't. It was another great race at New Hampshire. Once a team like Hirschman's catches its stride, it is very difficult to fight them off, and this was bad news for the rest of the field. Over the course of the next 3 races, Hirschman would have an average finish of 2.66 and close in to just 24 points of the leader Christopher, and he wasn't about to stop there. When the series returned to Connecticut, he wanted to prove the Sizzler win was no fluke. Hirschman won yet another pole, and in usual Hirschman fashion, would wait until there were just 36 laps remaining to take the lead. He was tested with yet another late race restart and was able to ace the test again to win the New England Dodge Dealers 150. However, TC finished right behind him, and he was unable to gain a lot of points as they headed back to Thompson. In one of the most important races due to its placement on the schedule, the August Thompson race is the race you need to perform at if you want to win the title, and Hirschman did just that. In almost a repeat of the last race at Stafford, Hirschman waited for his opportunity to pounce. On the lap 97 restart, he was able to pass Jimmy Blewett on the outside lane for the lead. After holding off Rick Fuller on the final 2 restarts, he would go back-to-back and win another in 2005, along with taking over the point lead with a massive swing of 63 points over Christopher. Unfortunately for Hirschman, the winning streak and summer dominance would grind to a halt after Waterford and Martinsville. He finished a rough 21st at the Speed Bowl and lost most of his point lead. Then at Martinsville, he was able to lead some laps and end up 7th. But TC won the race and took back the point lead by 21 points with just 4 races remaining. In the return to the traditional format for the Thompson 300, Tony Hirschman desperately needed some points to get back on top in the championship standings. He won the pole and fought with TC all day long. Both drivers swapped the lead, and in the end, on the final restart, Hirschman made on final shot TC for the win on the outside on the final lap, but ended up finishing second. When the modifieds went back to New Hampshire, TC won yet again. The point margin was 61 points with 2 races remaining. It looked like the Hirschman's chance at going back-to-back was over. However, Stafford was next. At the fall final at Stafford, Hirschman started 3rd and took the lead from Jimmy Blewett on lap 17 and led the rest of the way. The master of tire conservation was tested again, and he passed with flying colors. He used a no pit stop strategy and went the distance on 1 set of tires. Hirschman said, "The crew asked me how the car was during the second caution period, and the car was perfect, so we stayed out. We never had another opportunity to stop for tires anyways." He closed to within 36 points of the leader Christopher with just 1 race remaining. 36 points seemed like a tall order to make up in 1 race, especially with the level of competition on the tour. But Hirschman would redraw the pole to start the race, and in a rare appearance, rookie Matt Hirschman would make a start and would start outside pole in the World Series. Tony would get the upper hand, and after just 10 laps, the unthinkable happened. Christopher was entering turn 1 on the outside and caught the rear Nerf bar of Donnie Leah, and it sent TC hard into the turn 1 wall, ending his championship fight just like that. It was a pretty rough way to lose a title, but Hirschman would hold on and finish in the 12th position, which was good enough to win the title by a slim 18 points. Hirschman was able to just perform when it mattered. TC had the flashier and better season, with 7 wins, but the DNF at the worst possible time cost him the title. Hirschman had 5 wins, with 10 top 5s and 13 top 10s, with an all-important 6.61 average finishing position. Tony raced 2 more seasons before leaving NASCAR after the Flash race debacle for the ROC Modified Series, which races closer to home. He was able to win the major Sunoco Race of Champions Oswego 200 before he retired. It's amazing how Tony, with 5 championships and tied with 6-time champion Doug Coby on the all-time NASCAR modified win list, is not even on the NASCAR Hall of Fame ballot. It's a shame, but that's life. The first time I ever purchased a pit pass was at last year's Thompson World Series weekend, and I literally walked right past Tony helping his son Matt on the 60 car. Once you get bit by the racing bug, it's hard to shake off, and it's cool to see him at tracks like Thompson still. I need to say thank you to Paul Folan over at Folan Racing Photos. Due to the lack of video and photo content available from the early 2000s for modifieds online paired with no help from NASCAR to get archives and old websites that used to have lots of content, which are now broken or taken down, made this very hard. But Folan Photos had some good content to work with, and I think he deserves lots of credit. The guy sacrifices his free time from work to film and take pictures of races while we get to enjoy them in the stands, and I appreciate him. Because without him, some of these videos wouldn't be possible. I make these for fun and not for money or fame, and I hope you enjoy them and share it with your friends. It definitely brought back some fun memories when I was a kid in the grandstands. So long from the Speedway.